Hello, I'm David R. Jones of the Community Service Society. New York City's public advocate is an independently elected citywide official next in line to the mayor. My guest is our public advocate, Betsy Gotbaum, next on the Urban Agenda. Joining me now is longtime friend of the Community Service Society and former board member, public advocate Betsy Gotbaum. Welcome to the Urban Agenda.
Thank you, David.
Let's start by explaining to our viewers, what does the Public Advocate's Office do?
Well, that's a good way to start. The public advocate is really here to help people with their problems with government, whether it's a pothole that is so big that the car is disappearing in front of the house, or it's someone who has been denied food stamps, which I have a good story on that particular issue, or if it's someone who just has not gotten his or her Social Security check. They can call our office at 212-669-7200, and we have people there who will help. It's not the same as a referral. We actually work with people to try to solve their problems.
Now, does it have any specific powers to demand of the government do things for you?
Well,
or is that part of the difficulty here?
It's interesting, you know, where my sort of way of doing it is to try to work with the commissioners, because it's generally a commissioner of a city agency that you need to work with to try to solve the problem. So far, I've had tremendous luck. I haven't had any commissioner who's turned me down. So it seems to be working. Now, again, my predecessor, who had a very difficult and different kind of relationship with the city government or the mayor, was more feared, and I think sometimes the doors were shut on him. Again, it remains to be seen which is the most effective way.
Well, why don't you give the viewers some sense of how it would go? What kind of question would someone call in?
I'll give you a very good example of an issue where a man called us that he'd been denied food stamps. He was in the shelter system and was denied food stamps, which is illegal. He called our office to talk about it. We discovered that not only was it illegal, what was happening to him, but that in fact there is a huge problem citywide, that there are probably up to 800,000 people eligible for food stamps who aren't getting them for a whole bunch of reasons, including the fact that the application was 16 pages long. I'm here to say proudly, I think we had some influence on making it 2 pages long. So man calls, we see that he has a problem, we solve his problem with his food stamps and his housing, I might point out. And then we see there's an enormous citywide problem here. So we start looking at and attacking the citywide problem, and we've been doing that working with HRA, Human Resources Administration, United Way, and some of the food advocates. And what we've done is we raised private money, which is now conducting an enormous outreach program to try to sign up the first 100,000 people that we think are eligible.
So this has become a major initiative of the public advocate.
It is a major initiative of the...
From just all starting really with an individual call.
With a call. And what's interesting about it, remember, we have terrible economic times. The city is out of money. This is a federally funded program which brings money into the communities. Why not go after it? Whatever those 800,000 people aren't getting, they should be getting it. It's theirs.
Well, isn't this sort of a leftover actually from the prior mayoral administration? I know that Jason Turner, who was the former head of HRA, said that really food stamps shouldn't be given to people because it creates dependency as well. I'm still stunned. I thought that was all gone when Mayor Bloomberg took over.
Well, I think it is gone. I think the mayor and his commissioner have a very different attitude about it. I think the problem is it's a huge city, big centers all over, and sometimes that word hasn't filtered down. For the most part, I think the city is very receptive to increasing food stamp participation. In fact, last month, the month of March, food stamp participation went up about 15,000. So I think we're beginning to have an effect, and to me, that's how this office, Public Advocate, can be successful.
We're hearing through our social workers that the elderly are running into some problems at this point too. Has your office been getting calls from people who need support, who are elderly or in need of different supports?
We have a senior action line, and we get a lot of calls on it. Everything from, again, what do I do about the high cost of prescription drugs to
And what do you tell them about that?
Well, we do have a new one, which is we did a study and found out that about 40% of eligible seniors don't know that they are eligible for EPIC, which is the state insurance program for prescription drugs. So
that would help people through
yeah,
that.
so we try to tell people that call us about Epic. Now, sometimes they're not eligible, it turns out, but at least that's one positive thing we can say. There's not a lot that's going on out there, and again, food stamps are really important for the elderly,
right.
If they're eligible, and we try to teach people how to go and sign up, and we try to encourage them to do so. Earned income tax credit is a whole other area we're trying to help seniors make sure that they get signed up.
Tell the viewers how it would happen. Okay, I go and get your phone number, which we'll have here on the screen, hopefully, and I call in. What's going to happen? Who's going to answer my call when I
It
call
depends. If you're a senior, which you're not quite yet.
Or just, thanks, Betsy.
No,
Close. But no, I'm just an ordinary walking around.
You're an ordinary citizen.
So how will the process go?
You call the office and you will get assigned to a ombudsperson. And that ombudsperson will probably be an expert in the area that you're having a problem in, if that person is on at that time.
Right.
And that person then basically takes all of the information down and works through with you how to solve the problem.
So it won't be just one call.
Probably not. Almost always not.
Okay.
Sometimes we get informational calls that are just 1 or 2 minutes, but for the most part, it's a much longer process where the ombudsperson does a lot of calling, following up, calling the person back, making sure the person understands exactly how the problem was solved.
Now, how does this differ? The mayor is rolling out something called a 311 line, which is an information line. How is your work complementary or works with this new 311 line?
Well, I think they're
that's
very
an information line.
Yeah, they're very, very different. You
Right.
call 311 and you are referred into a center, which then will refer you to the agency that you need to get the information or most of the information. The operators don't try to solve your problem. If you call up and you say, look, there's a lot of glass in the playground near my house, then they refer you to the Parks Department. That you lodge your complaint, and the Parks Department is then supposed to resolve the problem. The problem with other 311 systems around the country
Right.
is oftentimes the agency says, we got the problem, we've solved it. But in fact, it doesn't really happen. That's where we come in. The person should, if that happens, should call us back, and we will then make sure the problem gets solved. And we're working very closely with the city to try to make sure that we have that oversight, because that's our job with the charter.
Essentially, you're going to be getting people who have already tried with their local commission or agency and haven't been able to get through.
Exactly, and there are reports again in other cities that have 311 system, people waiting 16, 17 minutes, get furious, throw the phone down, need to have a second place to call. Another wonderful story, a woman called 311 that her basement was flooding and that in fact the flooding was spreading, and the water company, she was referred to the water company said, okay, we fixed that, but in fact it was never fixed. The water was still going and going and going. So again, that's what we are. We're oversight to those kinds of problems where we will actually try to solve them.
Now, you're doing this with an extraordinary lack of resources. Yeah. I think many of the viewers may have heard this office really has been through a crisis in support. How are you operating? First of all, are you operating at full capacity yet? What does this office need to really be efficient?
Well, we're not operating at full capacity. We're trying to do as efficiently as we possibly can with what we have. My predecessor had 55 people. We have 29. And, you know, it's very, very difficult. On the other hand, we are leaner and meaner, and we're trying to do that. I have set up a not-for-profit, which the Fund for Public Advocacy, and the Fund for Public Advocacy is trying to raise money for various projects and programs that I don't have the money for. For example, the Ombuds Unit. We're beefing it up. We're bringing in a whole lot of new technology. We're fixing up the actual computers. We're giving training programs to the Ombuds people, et cetera, et cetera. That's all going to be paid for through the Fund for Public Advocacy. I'm sad about it, but there's not much I can do.
And the question is, do you think your funding is now level for the moment, or are you going to be suffering another round of cuts?
I can't take another round of cuts. I mean, we actually would then have to. We would cease to exist. I mean, I don't see how we can do that.
And this isn't an office that was created by the mayor's office. This has its own independent life through the charter.
This has its own independent life through the charter. The problem is that the mayor controls the budget, or OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, controls the budget. And unlike the Independent Budget Office, which has a set budget, the City Council has a set budget. This office does not have a set budget. So unfortunately, it really gets attacked much more than it should, I believe.
So in terms of how the public might help get the public advocate more support, how should they do? Should they talk to their councilman, or should they talk to the mayor?
They should actually talk. First, they should call us and see how we work and understand what we're trying to do here, how we really are here for New Yorkers. And then they should call their council person. They should write the mayor, and they should say, you know, this should be an independent office there to help New Yorkers. You know, it shouldn't be cut every time anybody turns around. And I believe that people can start making that happen.
Well, are they sort of lumping this whole issue in with the problems that the borough presidents are having,
Exactly.
maintaining relevance here?
My problems are very similar to that each of the borough presidents is having, exactly. And, you know, it's very hard for us because I believe that the borough presidents, like the public advocates, serve a real need in the boroughs. Now, I serve a citywide need, and there are a lot of people calling us. There are problems out there. So as long as there are problems, you've got to have somebody there to solve them.
We hear repeatedly through our social workers and the rest of accessing government is becoming an extraordinarily difficult task now. You get whoever invented the telephone response system, I think we should have a special circle in hell for these guys. I think most New Yorkers and people across the country now know that most services have to be accessed through one of these things. Actually, in the private sector, we've heard some really horrible stories of private companies actually delaying the time, increasing the time you were on the phone tree, in order to dissuade people from asking questions. Yeah, so that's not happening here.
No, and one of the things that I would like to point out is that we do have a live person who will talk to you and walk you through your problems. We can't always solve your problems, but we really do want to try.
We'll be right back to continue the urban agenda.
Hello, I'm Billy Collins, here to talk to you about poetry. April is National Poetry Month. Poetry not only brings together words and emotion, thought and feeling, the local and the universal, it also brings people together, reader and poet, then reader and reader, all finding a common ground. Read a poem this month, share it with family and friends, and do something you can't do with a painting or a piano. Carry a poem in your pocket.
We're talking with New York City's public advocate, Betsy Gotbaum. Betsy, I think most of the viewers have heard that there was a fight last year between you and Mayor Bloomberg. In the current budget thing, is this going to be going on? The mayor obviously is establishing a new charter revision commission. Is this issue going forward, or are they going to try to eliminate your office?
Well, the mayor has told me that he is not going to try to eliminate the office of public advocate, that he in fact thinks I'm doing a good job and the office is very important. So I don't think in this new charter revision that he is going to go after the office. What he has said is that he's going to try to get nonpartisan elections, which is something that I have a lot of trouble with. So I will obviously be fighting, as a Democrat, I'll be fighting to not have nonpartisan elections happen.
Well, we should digress a little bit about this. I've also come out on record against it as well, particularly because of its potential impact on minority. And poor communities, because suddenly when you have 51% plus of the city African American, Asian, and Latino, to suddenly who are basically concentrated around the Democratic Party structure, to suddenly go nonpartisan means please only be a billionaire if you want to run. Yeah. Because the access to media that it costs to run in New York is so huge. Without the parties, you can forget it. Don't have a net worth, less than enough to buy your Learjet.
Yeah, that's exactly what bothers me the most too. Is that nonpartisan elections really allow for the person who has the most money, or the incumbent who gets more. But
I'm also worried, in the midst of all the crisis we're going through, why this becomes a central issue to invest the public in. We've got a $3 to $4 billion deficit with the city of New York, and $12 billion at the state level. We have cuts in schools. We have cuts in health care. And nonpartisan election should be at the top of the agenda.
And I really feel, I think you just put your finger on something so extraordinary. I think the mayor's done a courageous job in taking over the schools. I think we all need to be in there worrying and working on that and trying to help them succeed in that, and to worry about nonpartisan elections now. First of all, it ain't broke, so don't fix it. And I feel very strongly that we are using resources and putting our attention on something that is really not that significant right now.
Well, in the recent news, of course, the mayor, to his credit, has begun to press both the governor and Washington about what's giving, you know, sometimes it's starting to feel like we're part of New York City is the axis of evil or something, the way they're cutting us to pieces. The disaster aid that gives more to people in the Midwest who have never been touched by terrorism, and New York gets the least. California and New York get the least of everything. What's going on here?
I don't understand it. Does it mean that people have sort of forgotten what happened here on September 11th? I think the mayor again went down and lobbied and won back the disaster relief I guess it was last Monday, and that's terrific. And then now the governor's mad because he feels that upstate New York should have as much as New York City, and we can't agree with that. Nobody else had happened to them what we had, and September 11th here and in Washington D.C. we need to be taken care of.
What are your ombudspeople on the front lines hearing from people who have lost jobs or who can't get back to work? Are you getting any calls on that?
We get a lot of calls, people worried about terror or what's going to happen.
Interesting.
And that started us, we did a program on disaster preparedness, again, raise private money.
Not duct tape.
Not duct tape. We never recommended duct tape. We have a recommendation that you have a kit, that it has a whistle and a flashlight and things like that. And we tell you very practical things to do. We did get a lot of people saying, what does orange alert mean? What am I supposed to do? We haven't gotten a lot about people losing jobs yet, although we have had people calling and saying, where do we go to get unemployment insurance? That's a big request.
People who think they're completely unaffected by this, I certainly thought I was one, though we did a lot of the disaster work for people who lost loved ones at the food service place. But I'm driving along the highway and I see something saying Amber Alert, look for license plate. And I told my wife, oh my God, there's something disastrous. Someone's driving a bomb along the highway. It turned out to be another system, which is actually very good for finding kidnapped kids who were kidnapped by, but I didn't know. And I was lecturing her about what we were going to do if we had to drive off the highway. And they wouldn't talk to me after a while because I got it completely wrong. But I think it's interesting how the kind of environment of heightened alert sends you off in the weirdest directions when you're not expecting it. And having, at least protocols of what people should do to sort of almost calm themselves down, that they have some options here, I think is invaluable. What do you think the state and city budget's going to do? I mean, you're getting sort of a bird's-eye view, obviously, from what you're hearing. What's going to happen here?
Well, my prediction, and again, it's only a prediction, is that I do think we will get the commuter tax. It won't be the same commuter tax that the mayor wants, but that we will get a commuter tax back, and that there will be some kind of a personal income tax surcharge, hopefully sunsetted, on people making over, I think people making over $100,000 a year. I think those are two issues that the state and the city could come to agreement on. Now, there are those who said that that's never going to happen, but I think that something's got to happen, something's got to give, and I understand that the unions came up today with a package of equal to about $600 million. I don't know what was in the package because nobody told us. I mean, it wasn't written anywhere or it wasn't on television. So I think you'll begin to see things happening. Something has to happen. We can't cut anymore. There are just, 15,000 layoffs. Okay, supposing we have 15,000 layoffs. What happens to those 15,000 souls? What's going to happen to them? Well,
it would clearly drive the unemployment rate that's already approaching 9% into the stratosphere. Now we're starting to get into serious issues of how you support the tax base and other things. We are starting through our social workers and work out particularly in Bedford-Stuyvesant and parts of Brownsville, starting to see an unraveling of some of the gains that were made in these communities. We're seeing more violence. There's no question that we're worried about our social workers who are outstationed now. More gun violence, actually, more kids who are becoming further and further disconnected. I know everyone was convinced that safe streets, safe cities, that obviously Mayor Dinkins and the rest, and certainly Mayor Giuliani proclaimed was the solution to everything. But even Charles Dickens recognized the causal connection between real serious poverty and lack of opportunity and increased crime among a very small sector of the community.
Well, David, I'd like to sort of tell you the story of yesterday. I was principal for a day in a gem of a school in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And it's a pre-K through 8th grade.
And what's the school?
PS 198. And 298, I'm sorry, 298. And an extraordinary school. It was at the very bottom, and in 4 years has just come up. It's about number 6 of all elementary schools in the city. Extraordinary school, extraordinary people. The principal and the assistant principals, all very strong, hopeful, work hard, so dedicated to these children, amazing. And we walked through the school, and one of the assistant principals would say, well, there's the pre-K, and that's going to go. Now, what are the parents who need this pre-K for them to get to work every day going to do when there's no pre-K? And we walk by the nurse's station. What are we going to do if there's no more nurse? And it was just devastating to see this school that has come so far and think about what the mayor is trying to do, and then all of a sudden
see it all unravel.
See it all unravel. And I was very touched by that yesterday. So we've got to fight. We've got to try.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were concerned in the advocacy community that we didn't hear the mayor's voice fighting hard enough. I know everyone wants to make nice here, and I know he's a born-again Republican or whatever he is. But the issues of how this city is going to sustain it and keep any of the gains that everyone was lauding here after 9/11 and a softening in softening in the economy is an understatement. What's happening here is a real concern. We haven't heard the kind of vigor on the fight that you'd expect. Somehow I don't think my former boss, Ed Koch, would be quite as mild in his discussions. You know, if this were going on.
What do you mean? He's one of the loudest voices around, right?
Yes.
Particularly on the commuter tax.
Right. But I think we're going to need that kind of uncomfortable challenging as to what obviously this city means for the entire region. It's not only because we want things that are nice here, but what's going to happen to all the New Jersey communities, all the the Suffolk, Nassau? How do they survive if we can't revive the New York City economy?
And if you're seeing violence beginning to creep up and crime begins to creep up, that's not good. Right. So I'm very concerned.
Tell us a little more about some of the other interesting stories that your ombuds people have been hearing as they call up and people are struggling to deal with bureaucracy.
Well, we get some wonderful stories, and I have to say that when we are able to solve a serious problem, boy, you really feel good. We had a call from a tenant in a building in Brooklyn who had for 8 months been living in these terrible conditions, and there was no elevator in the building, and there were holes all over the place and rodents, and there was no front door, no lock on the front door. And it was so bad, we looked up and found that the landlord had 1,000 violations. And so we went out there coincidentally with Channel 7 and really worked hard on trying to, again, solve the problem. Now I have to say, I have to give the landlord a lot of credit. The elevator's fixed, those apartments have been fixed, and we were very successful in getting it done, in enforcing it. And that is a really good kind of story. We had other stories, like on Valentine's Day, an 83-year-old woman called us and said that she had paid $3,200 to a dating service, and that nothing had happened. And could we help her? Well, we were able to get her money back. So we felt pretty good about that.
I thought you got her a date.
No. Don't announce that. We'll have too many calls.
Well, talking about this, okay, say we're going to get through this crisis. The city is tough as nails. I'm certain of it. I just hope we don't hurt too many thousands of people. But as we recover, what is your vision for the office? What would you like to see it as when it's fully operational and we're back in business again?
I would love to see this office able to take the situations that I've described, like the food stamps and the buildings that are deteriorating and people with their problems, be able to solve those problems with many, many more people than the people in the Ombuds unit right now. Have a 24/7 situation where we can actually really, really help New Yorkers, and then jump from those individual problems and look at the larger picture, so that we can then do reports on things like, for example, yesterday in the school, they serve breakfast. It's very simple. Yeah. There are only about 350 schools serving breakfast. Again, a federally funded program.
Why not?
Why? Why isn't everybody else doing it? We did a study on school breakfast. I'd like to keep issuing the report. Do it again. See how many more are coming out. Urge schools to serve breakfast for kids. Things like that, where we need people out in the community, seeing what's going on, people doing research, making sure that we've got all the facts straight, jumping back to the Ombuds unit where we're getting the calls in. So that would be my vision again, helping New Yorkers make government work for them.
My thanks to Public Advocate Betsy Gotbaum. In good times and bad, there's always a need for an independent voice within city government. This is especially so when citizens are having trouble with the government itself. And so often it's the poor who find themselves caught up in the bureaucracy without an advocate. CSS supports the mandate of the Office of the Public Advocate and believes that a sufficient budget must be allocated for the public advocate to work effectively on behalf of all New Yorkers. I'm David R. Jones of the Community Service Society. Thank you for watching the Urban Agenda.
To comment on the Urban Agenda or for more information on CSS, contact Community Service Society of New York, 105 East 22nd Street, New York, New York, 10010. Area code 212-254-8900.